I moved into the building on Claymore Avenue at the tail end of winter, when the gutters were still packed with dirty snow and every door hinge in the city seemed to creak from the cold. It wasn't glamorous, but it was cheap, and cheap was exactly what I needed after a breakup that had cleaned out my savings. The apartment was a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor. A narrow alley ran behind it, separating my building from an almost identical brick block across the way. The windows over there lined up perfectly with mine, so at night, when people forgot to close their curtains, I could see directly into their kitchens and living rooms. It felt a little voyeuristic at first, but soon it became background noise, tiny television screens of other people's lives flickering through my own. My first week passed quietly. I worked a late shift at a print shop, got home after midnight, ate reheated noodles, and collapsed. The only memorable thing was the alley's peculiar acoustics. Any sound, a dropped bottle, a cough, a cat yowling, echoed as if it were happening inside my own apartment. On the 7th night, I noticed the window across from my bedroom was open despite the cold. A woman sat on the sill, knees tucked under her chin, long black hair spilling over her shoulders. She faced inside, so I saw only her back. From my angle, the room behind her was almost completely dark, but the faint light from the alley lamp painted her in a dull silver outline. I didn't think much of it until I glanced up again 20 minutes later and realized she hadn't moved. Same posture, same stillness, like a photograph pinned in place. I finally went to bed, convincing myself she was just enjoying the cold night air. But when I woke around 3 a.m. to use the bathroom, she was still there. Exactly the same silhouette, knees drawn up, hair unmoving in the breeze. The next evening after work, the window was shut tight. 2 nights later, I saw her again. Same window, same pose. This time, though, her head was turned slightly toward me. I couldn't see her face clearly, only the faint suggestion of a cheekbone, but I had the strange, unmistakable sense that she was staring directly at me. I lowered my own blinds quickly, heart thudding, then laughed at myself. People watch each other through windows all the time in cities. Maybe she'd caught me looking first. Maybe I was the creep. Still, I couldn't shake the image. A week later, I worked an extra shift and got home closer to 2 in the morning. As I unlocked my door, I heard faint humming drifting through the alley. A woman's voice, low and almost tuneless, carrying that strange echo. When I stepped into my apartment, the sound grew clearer. Not music exactly, more like someone repeating the same few notes without words. I crossed to my window. The alley was empty. Every window was dark, except hers. The same woman sat there, but this time she was leaning forward, head bowed. Her hair hung like a curtain. The humming seemed to come from her direction, though her lips didn't move. A cold shiver crawled up my spine. I backed away, pulled the blinds shut, and tried to focus on anything else. Reheating leftovers, scrolling through my phone, even running the tap just to drown out the faint sound. Eventually, I fell asleep on the couch with the TV on low. The next morning, I decided to check the building directory in the lobby. Maybe if I knew her name, it would ground the situation in normalcy. But the building across the alley didn't share our lobby. Different landlord, different address entirely. I shrugged it off until that night, when I was brushing my teeth and heard a soft, deliberate knock on my window. Not the wall, the glass. I froze, toothbrush dangling from my mouth. Another knock, 3 slow taps, perfectly spaced. I crept into the living room. The blinds were still closed. I couldn't bring myself to open them. Instead, I stood there, barely breathing, until the knocking stopped. When I finally gathered the courage to peek outside, the alley was deserted. The next few days were a blur of half-sleep and jittery nerves. I started leaving the lights on at night. I told a coworker I was dealing with a neighbor who liked to play pranks. It sounded ridiculous even as I said it. Friday evening after my shift, I decided to face it head on. I'd knock on her door, if I could find it, and politely ask her to stop. I crossed the alley's icy pavement, hands shoved deep in my coat pockets. The front door of the opposite building was locked, of course. No buzzer panel, No mailboxes I could see through the grimy glass. I tried the handle again, harder. Solid. Then, as I stepped back, a flicker of movement caught my eye in the second-floor window directly above the door. Her window. The woman stood there, not sitting this time. She was close enough that I could finally see part of her face. Pale skin, dark eyes that looked like empty wells. Her hair framed her shoulders like wet seaweed. She didn't blink. I swear I heard that low humming again, even through the closed glass. I stumbled back into the alley, heart hammering, and didn't stop until I was inside my own apartment with the deadbolt thrown. That night I dreamt of water, black, bottomless water, and woke to the sound of my bedroom window sliding open. The lock was still engaged. The glass hadn't moved, but the cold night air smelled of damp earth and rust, and from somewhere across the alley came a single drawn-out note of humming. I barely slept the rest of that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren felt sharpened to a blade. When dawn finally smeared a gray light across the city, I checked the window again. Nothing. The alley looked ordinary. Wet brick, overturned trash bins, a thin mist curling upward as the snow melted. I convinced myself it was exhaustion. Too many late shifts, too much caffeine. The mind plays tricks when it's tired. That's what I told myself as I dragged through work, but the thought of her, of that humming, clung like a damp cloth against my skin. A name in the dark. That evening I made a decision. I'd talk to someone from the building across the alley. Maybe a neighbor could explain. After my shift, I grabbed a cheap bottle of wine as an excuse and headed over. The front door, as before, was locked. This time, a man in a delivery uniform exited just as I arrived. I slipped inside before the door clicked shut. The lobby smelled of mildew and old paint. Mailboxes lined the wall, rusted, numbers barely legible. I scanned them until I found the one that matched the window across from mine. Apartment 3B. No name. Only a faint ring of grime where a label should have been. I climbed the stairwell, each step groaning under my weight. The hallways were narrow, wallpaper bubbled and peeling. When I reached the third floor, a dim bulb flickered above the door marked 3B. I raised my hand to knock, and froze. From inside came that same low humming, soft but unmistakable. My skin tightened. Before I could force myself to move, the humming stopped. Then the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps crossed the floor toward the door. I bolted, down the stairs, through the lobby, out into the freezing night. I didn't look back until I was inside my own apartment, heart racing so hard it felt like it would punch through my ribs. Through my window I could see hers, dark and still. Messages in the window. The next 2 nights passed without incident. I started to wonder if I'd imagined the footsteps too. Maybe it was a neighbor in the hall. Maybe the humming had been a pipe rattle, a faulty vent. On the 3rd night, I came home to find something new taped to my bedroom window from the outside. A strip of old-fashioned photographic film, the kind you have to develop. I peeled it off with trembling fingers. 4 frames of negatives, barely visible, but I could make out the shapes. The first was my living room. The second, my kitchen. The third, my bedroom. The 4th frame was a close-up of my own face, eyes closed, mouth slightly open, taken while I slept. I stumbled back, the film shaking in my hand. My locks were intact. The windows had no scratches. But someone had been inside, and I already knew who. I called the police. They sent 2 officers who walked through my apartment, checked the windows, the fire escape. They found nothing. "Old building," one of them said. "Easy to spook yourself. Get better curtains." They left a warning sheet about burglary prevention and drove away. I didn't bother trying to sleep. Instead, I sat on the couch with every light on, phone clutched in my hand. Around 2 a.m., the city outside seemed to fall into a vacuum. The usual hum of traffic, the distant horns, all gone. Not quiet, but absent, like someone had pressed mute on the world. Then I heard it. Not humming this time. A whisper, My name. Drawn out, stretched until it barely sounded human. I spun toward the window. The blinds rattled, though there was no breeze. The whisper came again, closer, right behind me. I turned, and she was standing in my living room. She was taller than I expected, her hair a dripping black curtain, clothes clinging to her as if she'd climbed from a river. Her eyes were pits of darkness, no whites, no pupils, just void. Water pooled at her bare feet, spreading silently across the wood floor. I couldn't move, my body locked as if frozen solid. She tilted her head, and that low humming started again, vibrating the air itself. I forced a step backward. Another. The floor beneath me was slick. When I glanced down, the puddle had reached my shoes. I grabbed the door handle. Dry. When I looked back, she was inches from me. Her face hovered so close I could smell damp earth and rust. A whisper like a breath slid into my ear. Stay. The room spun. A wave of blackness swallowed everything. I woke to daylight streaming through the blinds. The floor was dry. No puddle, no footprints. The film strip lay where I'd left it on the table. But when I crossed to the window, my stomach dropped. Across the alley, apartment 3B was no longer dark. The curtains were wide open. The room inside was empty. No furniture, no signs of life. A for lease sign hung crookedly in the glass. I dressed quickly and marched back to the building, determination fighting the dread in my chest. The door was unlocked this time, the lobby reeking of dust. An older woman in a maintenance uniform emerged from a side closet. I asked about 3B. She squinted, shook her head. No one's rented that in years. Pipes froze last winter. Landlord never fixed them. Whole floors sealed. My mouth went dry. I saw someone there. A woman. The maintenance worker gave a tired shrug. People say they see things. Some girl drowned in the alley drain back in the 80s. Happens every few years. Somebody swears she's back. She closed the closet and shuffled away. That evening, I packed a bag and called a friend across town to crash on their couch. But before I left, I made the mistake of looking one last time across the alley. The apartment was still empty. Yet in the reflection of my own window, just behind my shoulder, a pale face hovered, close enough to fog the glass. The hum started again, soft, endless, as the lights in my building flickered and went out. I didn't turn around. I just ran. The night I agreed to drive the supply van through Raven Pass, the weather forecast said only light snow. That was a lie. By dusk, the clouds had thickened into a bruised ceiling and the radio warned of a fast-moving front. But my manager had begged. Our small-town clinic was running out of crucial medication and the next shipment wouldn't arrive for days. It was a 2-hour trip through the mountains. I'd driven it 100 times. I thought I knew every turn. The van's heater coughed lukewarm air as I left the last cluster of city lights behind. The road narrowed to a 2-lane ribbon that cut through endless pine. Snow began as a gentle dusting, soft flakes that melted on the windshield. Within 20 minutes, it thickened into a white curtain, swallowing the world. Raven Pass is notorious for sudden fog, but that night the mist rose so quickly it felt alive. One moment the pines loomed clear and black. The next they dissolved into a blank wall of white. My headlights barely reached the hood. I slowed to a crawl. That's when I saw it. A figure on the shoulder, barely visible in the swirling snow. A lone hitchhiker. Impossible. No one walked this road in a storm. I tapped the brakes, squinting. The figure was tall, wearing what looked like a dark parka with the hood pulled up. One arm extended, thumb out. Every instinct screamed to keep driving, yet something, maybe habit, maybe pity, made me stop. I rolled the window down an inch. Need a ride? The figure nodded once. I leaned over to unlock the passenger door. When it opened, a blast of cold air flooded the van. The person climbed in silently and shut the door. Snow shook from the hood, and for a second I saw a pale face, too pale, as if the skin had been carved from moonlight. "Where you headed?" I asked. A pause, then a voice, low and flat. Same as you. I tried small talk. The stranger gave one-word answers. Name. Call me Ash. Destination? Clinic. Odd coincidence. The clinic was at the far edge of town, down a road that dead-ended into the old quarry. Not a place for casual travelers. As we climbed higher, the storm worsened. Wind howled through the pass like a living thing. I focused on the yellow center line, heart drumming. Ash sat perfectly still, not even a shiver. At one point, I glanced sideways and caught their reflection in the side window, except it wasn't a reflection. The glass showed only empty seat and swirling snow. I snapped my eyes back to the road. Everything okay? Ash asked, voice soft, almost amused. Yeah, I lied. Lost time. The drive through Raven Pass normally takes 40 minutes, but after what felt like hours, the mile markers still read the same numbers. I should have been descending by now, but every curve revealed another endless climb. My phone lost signal. The dashboard clock flickered, then froze at 11:17 p.m. I tightened my grip on the wheel. This isn't right, I muttered. Ash finally turned to me, hood falling back slightly. Their eyes were a deep, unnatural black, catching no light. You missed the turn, they said. There is no turn, I shot back. It's one road. Ash smiled faintly. You asked for the fastest way. My stomach dropped. I hadn't said that, not aloud. The tunnel walls closed around us like a throat. My headlights flickered and died, yet a faint bluish glow bled from the rock itself, enough to paint the dashboard in ghost light. The van kept rolling, engine silent. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles burned. Ash sat motionless, hood back now, face pale enough to reflect the strange light. Those bottomless black eyes never blinked. What is this place? I managed. Ash tilted their head, as if considering whether to answer. The road you asked for, they whispered. I didn't. You did, they cut in, voice like dry leaves. Every driver who comes through here asks. They always think it's only a shortcut, a quicker way home. The tunnel widened into a cavern, its ceiling lost in darkness. My van coasted to a stop in front of a wall covered in metal plates, hundreds, maybe thousands of them, each etched with a single name. I stepped out, legs shaking. The air tasted metallic like blood. The plates closest to me were recent. I ran my fingers across them. Kara M., 2022. Benjamin R., 2023. Lena P., 2024. Fresh scratches, sharp enough to cut. A low hum vibrated the stone. I turned. Ash stood beside me, though I hadn't heard them move. This is the place where the lost keep their promises, they said. I never promised anything. You promised speed, safety, an easier way. Every driver who chooses the storm and ignores the warnings makes the same silent bargain. The hum deepened, almost a heartbeat. One night, a week after the storm, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I answered on instinct. A faint hum filled my ear, followed by a voice soft and cold. You paid the toll. I froze. Who is this? You know. A pause. The road is always hungry. Next time, bring someone else. I still drive for work, but I never take Raven Pass again. Even so, when I'm alone on a late shift, sometimes I catch a reflection in the passenger window. A pale figure with black eyes, sitting perfectly still, waiting for the next shortcut. It started in January 2004, when I was a rookie paramedic in upstate New York. Small town, middle of nowhere, snow stacked 6 feet against barns and fences. Calls were usually boring, slip and falls, the occasional drunk driver. But that night, the radio crackled with something different. Unresponsive male, possible cardiac. Location, 1197 Craydon Road. Craydon Road was farmland, a string of decaying houses nobody talked about. The dispatcher's voice was tight, nervous. I glanced at my partner, Mike. He just muttered, "Damn it, not out there." We drove 30 minutes through blinding snow before the GPS cut out. Finally, the headlights hit it. A sagging two-story farmhouse, roof bowing under snow, every window black. No one waited outside, no porch light, just silence and the sound of wind through frozen trees. Mike knocked. Nothing. He knocked harder. Finally, the door creaked open an inch. A man stood there, late 40s maybe, pale skin stretched too tight, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in weeks. He didn't say a word, just waved us inside. The house stank, not of dust, not of animals. It was sweet and rotten, like spoiled meat. My stomach turned. "Where's the patient?" Mike asked. The man pointed down a narrow hallway. His hand trembled, but he still said nothing. We followed. The hallway opened into a kitchen, counters stacked with dirty dishes and black mold climbing the wallpaper. The smell grew worse. Then I saw the basement door. Open. A faint yellow bulb glowed below. Mike cursed under his breath. They better not be down there. We descended creaking wooden steps. At the bottom was a long, low-ceilinged room with stone walls. The patient lay on a cot in the center. Young male, maybe 20. Thin, bruised, shirtless. His skin was pale as snow, lips cracked. I rushed forward, checking for vitals. Pulse. Weak, but there. His eyes fluttered open. He whispered something I couldn't hear. Mike leaned closer. "What? Say again?" The boy's lips barely moved. "Don't let him. Take me back down." I froze. Back down. Then I realized the basement we were in had another door. A heavy steel one at the far wall with a thick chain lock. Scratches marred the wood around the frame, as if someone or something had clawed to get out. The boy started convulsing. I called for the stretcher, focused on stabilizing him. But when I looked back at the stairs, the man who let us in was standing at the top, watching silently. His lips curled into a faint smile. We got the boy upstairs, loaded him into the rig. He gripped my wrist so hard I thought he'd break bone. "Don't let them take me back," he whispered again, tears streaking his face. Them, not him. Them. Faint. From the other side of the door, a voice. Weak, hoarse. A child's voice. "Help me." That whisper, "Help me," froze me. My breath steamed in the beam of my flashlight as I stepped closer to the steel door. "Hello?" My voice cracked. "Who's in there?" The scratching began again, slow, desperate, fingernails on wood. Scrape, scrape, scrape. I pressed my ear to the door. Behind it, muffled sobs. Definitely a child. "Please, he keeps us down here. Snap." The sound echoed through the basement. My heart pounded. Snap. One by one, the chains fell loose, clattering against stone. When the last link dropped, I hesitated. My hand hovered on the latch. Every instinct screamed not to open it. But then, that voice again, weak, fading. "Please!" I pulled. The door groaned open. I woke up in my own bed, morning light spilling through the curtains, no sign of snow on my boots, no bolt cutters, no evidence I'd ever gone back, except for one thing. On my wrist, burned deep into the skin, was a mark, a circle with lines through it. The same symbols from the basement wall. I've tried to scrub it, burn it, cut it. It won't fade. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls and the snow presses against the windows, I hear the scratching again.